Good morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM. This is John Massengale. I'm sitting in the studio in Austin, and I'm joined by my cohort, Jonathan Green. Mr. Green, how are you this morning?
Early, but okay.
It is a bit early here in Austin.
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm actually excited.
I know, it's a fantastic, isn't that qualifying? Hasn't this race at Baku just turned into something you look forward to?
Well, it's actually the juxtaposition of having it with Monaco and having that comparison. I mean, it used to be, I don't think it was quite that close before, but it really is turning into be the ultimate street race, street fight. Man the battlements, let's go to the castle. It really is.
A street fight with a 210-mile-an-hour straightaway.
You know what it reminds me of? And I've been going to Macau for almost the last 30 years. The Formula 3 race in Macau, which is what a lot of these guys came up through. And that's just outside Hong Kong. If you don't know where Macau is, the sort of the gambling capital of China and the world nowadays. It's a street circuit similar to this, and it has this long straight. So the compromise is always on setup because it twists through the tunnels and twists through the narrow bits, just as we do here with turn 13 to 15. Then you've got this long straight. Yeah. No, well, I'm talking about Baku, yeah.
Yeah, well, by the way, let me run down what we got on the show today because I'm really excited. We have Bob Varsha is going to join us here momentarily. I think he's having some internet connection trouble, so we'll get him on shortly. We also have former Haas F1 team manager Dave O'Neill, who's been regular on the show, going to be on this morning. And later in the show, we have a couple of guests. Jonathan, talk about our young driver guest first.
Yes, David Malukas, who is leading the Indy Lights Championship, and it's a really, really good. I mean, if you remember, Indy Lights was cancelled last year because of COVID, and then the year before that, they only had a few entries. It was like 6 or 7 entries. Toby Sowery's there, Kyle Kirkwood's there, Linus Lundqvist, who's been on the show many times, the young Swede who absolutely dominated last year in FR. Has now moved up to Indy Lights. So it's a really competitive year, a lot of good entries, a lot of good drivers, and this is a young American at 19, leading the way at the moment.
Very cool. We got a young American leading that. So also, in the post-race show, as you might have heard, the Singapore Grand Prix has been canceled, right? And, of course, immediately the rumors started flying about what are they going to do? Are they going to potentially try to fill that slot? Well, apparently the first name that came up was right here in Austin at Circuit of the Americas for a double header. And yes, I flew out of my chair and jumped on Twitter and tried to find out what was going on, if that was...
Billy Joel twice?
Yeah. Who are we going to get? The Rolling Stones and then Billy Joel? How about that? So the first thing we did was reach out to COTA and reach out to Bobby Epstein, and he said, yeah, I'd love to come on the show and talk about that. So in the post-race show today, at about 9:30 Austin time, 10:30 Eastern, we're going to have Bobby Epstein on to talk about the possibilities of this doubleheader happening
Or at least the discussion of, because it really is, it's come out of nowhere, really. It's left field. I mean, let's see what he says. Let's see what's occurring.
Yeah, and when we get Bob and Dave on, I want to talk about this because there's so many possibilities, and so, why this might happen, why this, might not. So there's lots to discuss about that.
And there's precedent for it from Silverstone and from Austria.
Yeah. And if all of that's not enough, we also have an interview with the mayor of Miami Gardens, Rodney Harris. And if you have been paying attention...
I'll tell you what, our research team has been good this week.
They have. Miami Gardens is actually the little suburb of Miami where they're going to have the race, the Formula One race in Miami next year. And so he's the mayor of Miami Gardens. And we have him on talking about what they have already done and what they're looking forward to do in Miami to get ready for a Formula One race.
Well, and if you've been following this story, obviously they've been trying to make this happen around the Dolphins and around Stephen Ross and so on for the last few years. It's not happened, but now they have a contract with they moved it slightly, but it's still around the stadium, as it were. But they've got a 10-year contract. Think about the economic impact that we've had here in Austin. And now Miami are going to get that. It's not the richest part. It's not South Beach. This is So the economic impact is going to be huge.
Yeah, and we could tell them all about that because we have watched what has happened to a city and a racing culture here in Austin because we didn't have one. And now, absolutely, we have a speed city here because
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to have seen what happened to Austin and the racing culture and all that around it. So I'm excited for us to have him on and talk about that because it's going to be fun to watch Miami go through what we went through.
Yeah.
All right, well,
let's get back to
the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, the 6th round of the 2021 season. And this is going to be exciting. If qualifying was any indication, this is going to be a blast of a race to watch. Because like we were saying, man, there's super slow corners. There's a crazy fast. And how do you have a car that compromises and does well at both ends of that? It's really exciting.
Well, I know it's interesting. People are split between this. I was listening to Checkered Flag, and Jolyon was apoplectically excited by the fact that so much drama was going on with Norris getting a fine. By the way, I want to talk about that with with Leclerc on pole and so many different manufacturers up there, but also the sort of other side of that, Jack Nicholls saying, we didn't really see a qualifying because there was four red flags. And, people like Verstappen and, other guys didn't actually get to do their final run. So the grid could be quite different.
Oh, yeah. And everybody was complaining that didn't come out on top of that they could have had a better run. And 4 red flags, that is the most in qualifying. That ties for the most ever in Formula One history. So, I was watching going, oh, wow, 2nd red flag. Oh, a 3rd, a 4th. So it was very crazy and exciting. And the biggest thing that struck me was the fact that, I'm just excited that Charles Leclerc, that Ferrari,
yeah.
It's not Red Bull, it's
2 in a
not
row.
Mercedes. Yeah, it's 2 in a row.
And he didn't get to do the first one.
Yeah.
But he's that lap, as he even confessed, was not the greatest of laps, but boy, it was a good lap. And at the right time, he only did it first time out, and that's what was needed, and he got it sorted. So, yeah, I'm really excited for that. It's going to be really interesting to see if he can hold on to it. There is that huge option for a tow. We'll talk more about that. I hope Dave O'Neill does come on and talk more about that because it's going to be a big factor.
Well, that was the factor in qualifying.
Right.
Because they're saying it was worth at least a half a second. Okay, let's talk about a half a second in Formula One. A 10th in Formula One.
You can watch all your Netflix shows in that time.
Exactly. There's a huge, huge difference. I mean, like you just said, Charles Leclerc said, I did not have a great lap and still was on pole because he got a nice tow. At least one. I was talking to O'Neill about all this, and he was saying, don't forget, it's not just one good tow. You could get multiple tows, drafting, as they call it, NASCAR and everything else. But it is such a significant difference in the way that your car goes around the track. And Jonathan, we talked a little bit about this yesterday.
Get 5 toes, you got a foot.
Is the fact that it could make a huge difference during the race, obviously, and how that could affect the race, not just qualifying.
Oh, absolutely. And I think strategy is going to be interesting. I think track position. I mean, the difference between here and Monaco, for those who don't know, is yes, it's a street circuit and it's very narrow in places to a point where, turn 15 particularly, I mean, you're literally threading the needle. But unlike Monaco, there are plenty of wide open spaces to overtake, particularly the long straight with DRS and so on and so forth into that first corner. And we've seen in the past that it tends to... It's a bit like Turn 1 at COTA. It tends to encourage you to make decisive moves that may not turn out to be decisive. They may turn out to be a disaster. We saw the Red Bull guys crash into each other, if you remember, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
We saw Vettel and Hamilton get into a fracas a couple of years ago with them being very verbal and Vettel, of course, actually punting Hamilton after the incident. So, it can lead to some quite fiery times. And given what we've seen this season and how competitive it's already become, with Verstappen now leading the championship, and Mercedes on the back foot, no question.
Man, did you hear Lewis Hamilton talking about, I know we're used to Lewis talking about tires during the race, and I still feel that's a very strategic discussion.
Yes,
But he talked about the way he was talking about the car being, we don't know what's wrong. It's not right, and we don't know what's not right.
And Bottas the same.
And Bottas saying, what did that sound like to you? To me, that sounded like the Haas F1 team of the last couple of years.
Clearly, and I listened to the press conference, as I'm sure you did, Lewis and Valtteri, and to a certain extent Toto Wolff, and everything it seems that is going on with Mercedes is not as it should be. They've had, and it's always the case when you have. It's the same in a soccer team like Manchester United or Real Madrid or whatever. Is that when you have the success is expected, and when you don't suddenly start winning, heads roll and people get mad. And we've never seen Mercedes really in the last decade as much on the back foot as they are now with the other teams, both Ferrari and Red Bull, chomping at their heels.
This is the most they've been in the turbo hybrid era. So absolutely. Yep. Well, it sounds like we have Mr. Bob Varsha joining us. Mr. Varsha, how are you this morning besides internet troubles?
Breathing heavily, hoping for the Wi-Fi to come back with my fingers firmly crossed. Good to be with you guys again.
Well, thanks, Bob. Yeah, we have been, we've run down all the exciting things we have on the show with all our guests and everything, and just running down what we're looking for today. And I think
I've been listening. I've been on the phone listening to the whole thing.
Okay, great. So you've been trying to connect. Well, we're hoping to get Dave O'Neill too, former Haas F1 team. Oh, it sounds like we do have Mr. O'Neill. And Dave O'Neill, how are you this morning?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. I must have been on the same line as Bob.
Exactly. Using the same computers.
Well, Dave,
same excuse anyway. Yeah.
Dave, you gotta head out to Circuit of the Americas this morning for some work out there, I guess, this morning.
Yes, we're doing some little bit of track day work out there, so we can enjoy a little bit of company for the meanwhile.
So you're not just cleaning up after the wrecks at NASCAR
then? No, I think the water did that.
Yeah, I think so. Hey guys, great to have both of you on. I know you both have a perspective on Baku for different reasons. Bob and Dave, just give us an idea on, because a lot of people like myself, I've never been to Azerbaijan or Baku, and I'm just interested because it is quite a unique place. And when you see the pictures of the modern skyscrapers and the obviously historic town, give us a perspective.
Dave, you want to lead off?
Yeah, I mean, if we leave the racing just to one side, pretty historic place. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the middle of Texas with the sulfur smells blowing off the sea. Quite an interesting country. Obviously, the track is at sea level on the main straight, which you come down opposite the pits, and then they start the climb up to the castle into the old town. So there is an elevation gain there, which you have to look at. So you've got streets that are covered, so you don't get too much wind on them, but you also get the funnel effect with the streets. So you've got the huge straight, which typically cools the car and the tyres down, and then you need all that grip going into turn one. And this is why I think we see so many cars off, is that they can't get the heat back into the tyres straight away after that long straight. So anyone that you see is doing a serious lap is either getting a huge toe or two toes, and then warming the tyres up significantly enough to get the grip to be back on it. And of course, there's a huge amount of dust there as well. So the dust, when the wind does blow, blows underneath the Tecco barriers and onto the circuit, and the lap typically changes from lap to lap. So unless you are following someone who's making a clear path for you, almost like driving in the snow, when you see the tracks, this is what the drivers are having to cope with around the city, and the temperature change with the sun creeping over the buildings as well. One side of the track is going to be warmer than the other. But yeah, very interesting place. I enjoyed my time when I did it there. But don't underestimate the back straight coming out of turn 15 that goes down onto the main straight is very, very steep. It doesn't give you any elevation gain perspective on the TV. But I enjoyed my time there. It was fun, and also quick learning as well the first year, understanding the track and the temperatures.
Dave, I love this snow analogy. That's such a great way to visualize the aerodynamics with the snow. But hey, Dave, talk about the technical sides of this, because you and I touched on this about how maybe even different suspension components and wheels and everything else. I've seen some of the control arms and A arms and stuff that were carbon, but you said some of the teams may even use different, either maybe even connections, joints or whatever out of steel rather than carbon, because it give them that flexibility where they could touch the wall. Like Nikita Mazepin, actually, who touched the wall, who didn't crash. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of look at this race similar to Monaco. So obviously the guys have got the suspension from Monaco. So typically you'd upgrade track rods, towing arms, whatever people reference them to, and the lion's share of the suspension on any Formula One car is carbon. Sometimes they have different wishbones at the back to be able to take the heat, but the front of the car is leading, as you can imagine. So that touches the barrier first. So track rods are normally reinforced, and also where the carbon is I guess effectively like a piece of glass. It's strong, it has a rigidity, it doesn't flex, and as soon as it does get an impact, it will delaminate, it will fracture, and then it loses its rigidity and breaks. So, yeah, typically the suspension is beefed up a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, just to be able to take the little touches. And in order to be very quick at this circuit, you need to, like they do Champions Wall in Canada, you need to kiss some of the barriers now and again. So those are the things you've got to look at. And then again, going back to the big trade for aero for cooling. You've got the huge straight, and then of course you've got the twisty turny part, 6, 7, 8, I think it is. So you're looking for all the downforce you can then. So you go down the straight, you want to pull all the wings off, go as fast as you can, brake cooling, etc. And then as soon as you get to the corners, you want that wing and grip back on. So it's a fight. And also, if you do put a load of downforce on, you've got to have a really strong engine to pull it down the straight or push it down the straight. And I think that, I guess Ferrari have certainly got that mix right. And also, as we talked about it yesterday, Leclerc was lucky enough and managed to put himself in a position to get the toe. And again, people talk about toes all the time, or drafting, whichever way we talk about it. But you can get two here, and also if your teammate is going to help you, you can get one really decent one, and then finish off or start by something simple at the start or the beginning. But you'd have to have a good teammate, similar to the Schumacher-Massa era.
Yeah, and Bottas actually did a really good job of that with Hamilton, and was a good teammate and gave him a nice.
The same,
that's true. All right, guys. Well, hey, we need to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue to break down the Formula One Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Listen to Speed City live from Austin, Texas. Back after these messages.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM.
The Speed City F1 pre-race show on SiriusXM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Use the cloud to secure your team in the office, at the track, or anywhere with CrowdStrike at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. All right, gentlemen, I want to continue discussion with Mr. Dave O'Neill, the former Haas F1 team manager, because Bob Varsha, you have a great question that you talked about during the break just now that you want to ask Dave O'Neill.
Yeah, Dave, I'm curious about the team manager's role. When you get a situation like we've seen, tensions rising within the team, particularly most recently at Mercedes, and Lewis is barking at the team on the radio, and Valtteri Bottas is going around sulking about whether or not he's a number 2 driver, that sort of thing. What kind of role does the team manager play, if any, in trying to smooth those waters or motivate people?
See, you mean exactly on the grid, Bob? Is that what you mean? Just as they're lining up prior to the race?
Well, actually, in daily life in the team, I mean, and how do we keep the waters calm when the stuff hits the fan as it has lately for Mercedes?
I got you. Yeah. So I mean, there's no getting away from it. You sit. It's like a classroom up in the truck, or the way in this case they haven't got the trucks there. They have the offices. So you sit facing each other. So it's normally the team principal will have an office on his own, but the team manager and chief engineer will sit at the end of the table, if you like, looking down, and then both team sides will sit opposite. The interesting bit in any of my involvement in Formula One and also driver rivalry is it's normally pretty honest, and the recovery side is typically pretty quick. So the team principal will let it happen a little bit because it needs, you need to sort it out yourselves type thing. But when it becomes childish, which it does in some cases, he steps in and normally makes you look pretty stupid in front of everyone. In my cases, so but the team manager, if there's any sort of, he said, she said, you normally say, look, this is. It's not a time for it now. Let's talk about it after the meeting, and that's when the tensions normally grow. Is when the debriefs happen. Well, you had this on, or you had that on. That's why you went quicker, and then you have to get back to the regime. Really, the chief engineer will take over and say, well, yeah, let's look at the data and we'll go through it, and sort of chuck a bucket of water on it, but. Never really had any fisticuffs, just had a lot of swearing and, testosterone getting thrown around. But it's quite interesting. It makes for competition, really, Bob. If people don't do that, they're not passionate about what they're doing. So,
Good point.
Yeah, they want to move forward. So, but yeah, normally a number one and number two driver aren't really many like each other. They kind of tolerate each other, and they keep like a couple of wild dogs. Really, they keep their distance. It's just when they do sniff each other, that's when it kind of goes.
Nice analogy. Dave, I got a question. I know it's not one that you would know the answer to, but you have dealt with and understand that Haas has had a similar problem in the past, which is all I can glean from both Bottas and Hamilton is that it's tire temperatures, that they're struggling to get the tires where they want them to be. What do you think is the cause for Mercedes this year?
Well, that is a very difficult question. I can only surmise and say that they've taken the ability to get the tyres to where their loving operating temperature is by putting a bit of downforce on or taking some downforce off the car. And also with the system they had on last year, maybe that's, maybe they're having to relearn from that as well. Is it the DAS, if I'm correct in saying? Maybe.
Oh yeah.
Maybe maybe they're recovering from that. You can go off in a direction in development, and you can do damage because you're doing so much good there and then. Maybe those are the problems they're having. Maybe
that is a really good point, Dave. Because they were probably just over the top excited about this new DAS system, dual axis steering, where Hamilton was pulling and pushing the wheel and adjusting the toe of the car.
I thought that was brilliant.
No, it's such a simple, brilliant idea. But like we were speculating yesterday, is that you have that distraction, and then you have the big change in the aero from the barge, the floors. They've reduced the ratio at the back of the car. So having to deal with all that, I mean, I suppose even Mercedes is susceptible.
Plus, Red Bull have moved forward. Honda have got what they, doing the bids, and Ferrari have moved forward.
Yeah. What was that, Dave?
I said, of course, the other thing is no time to test. So, the thing we have to give credit to is the teams, how quick they're developing in the 6 days in winter testing. So they have a theory, they put it in R&D, they move it around, they shake it, and then they put it on put it on a car for the testing, and they developed that system so quickly in winter testing, and they knew that no one else could ever do that in that amount of time. So it was produced, launched, developed, executed, job done. Similar to the Brawn, with their
double diffuser.
with the diffuser, when they had the stole the march on the rest of the grid then. So these are the things that I think Formula One are looking for, is these little innovations, but of course, how do you recover from them when they get banned?
Yeah. Well, Dave, I want to ask you, last night when we were talking, you talked about you used to walk or even run the track, and you talked about some of the elevation change, how you don't really see it on television.
Yes. I mean, the straight, I've got a quick question for Bob as well. There was a huge amount of talk in the team managers meeting why they call turn 20, because it's actually, as you look at the map, it's a straight to anyone else. But maybe they're going to name it after someone, and they have to have turn 20 there, just for the royal family or whatever.
Yeah.
But the circuit has huge amount of elevation change. So obviously the front straight is pretty flat all in all, and then you turn into turn one. And that's reasonably flat, and then that's when after 3 is the climb starts, and it doesn't really stop until you come out and onto the descent. I think it's 15 when you start going down the sort of the curve, the straight onto the main straight. So yeah, that's the difference, and also the wind as well. You have a huge amount of wind coming off the ocean, and then the funnel effects from all the buildings out where the old part of the city is.
Yeah, I looked it up, Dave. The elevation change is 89 feet. So yeah, you're right. That's not insignificant. So yeah, Dave, what about the number of stops here? 1 stop, 2 stop. I mean, you got all these factors, including that elevation change, the long straight, the tight corners. I mean, what do you expect, and what have you seen in the past?
Well, I think typically they talk about 2 stops, but the biggest thing here is the amount of safety cars, which we have to look out for. So whatever you plan for, and we talk about switching the tyres back on, is you might get pushed into a tyre change purely because of the way the tyres go out of the zone. So you're looking at half a degree a lap for the temperature change or drop in the tyres from 120 degrees when you bolt them on the car. Is, if you get out of that zone, there's no way of switching them back on. And the masters of switching them back on are typically the guys at the front, because they can run more downforce and they have the power, the Verstappens and the Hamiltons who have the knack to do it. And also Norris as well. You have to bring him into the frame. So I think it's one of these races like Monaco, what you plan for tyre strategy-wise, you also have to have B's and C's strategies as well with the crash damage that we've seen in the past. So difficult one to lay your hands on, really.
All right, guys. Well, let's take another quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue to break down the Formula One Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Listen to Speed City live from Austin, Texas. Back after a break.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back. We've got about 30 minutes before the start of the Formula One Grand Prix in Baku, or the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Very excited for this race. I guess I am for every race, but particularly for this race. And we have Dave O'Neill on the phone, former Haas F1 team manager. We have Bob Varsha with us via Zoom. But let me just run down. We haven't really talked about the grid because it was such a fantastic qualifying yesterday. And having Charles Leclerc, Ferrari on pole again
back to back
races. It's so exciting. We've got the Red Bull team and Max Verstappen leading the championship, which is amazing to begin with, considering how the dominance of Ferrari. But let me just run down. So we got Charles Leclerc on pole, Lewis Hamilton right behind him, then Max Verstappen. So that'll be an interesting 1, 2, 3 to start this race. And then Pierre Gasly qualified 4th. I mean, how awesome is that?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Terrific job. Mm-hmm.
And then Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, Sergio Perez, Yuki Tsunoda up in 8th place. Fernando Alonso looking good lately. Then Valtteri Bottas all the way down in 10th for the Mercedes team. And then right behind him, Sebastian Vettel, who's been resurging a little bit, I think getting used to that car. Esteban Ocon, Daniel Ricciardo, who's been doing the opposite of Sebastian Vettel, moving the opposite direction. Kimi Räikkönen, George Russell, Nicholas Latifi, Mick Schumacher, Nikita Mazepin in 18th, and then Lance Stroll, who had a crash in qualifying, and so did Antonio Giovinazzi. But let's talk about some of these stories. By the way, Dave O'Neill, I know you've got to get out to Circuit of the Americas this morning. How much time do you have with us?
I can do the next half hour, no problem.
Okay, great. So I just want to run down this grid this morning because we've talked about Leclerc quite a bit, how he had a fantastic tow and really did not have, by his own admission, a super clean lap. But what about Lewis Hamilton? Bob, what do you think about, we touched on how Mercedes has said they've struggled with the car, but what about his lap?
Well, I think he described it best. He said it was a huge achievement for the team. They were obviously in trouble on Friday. Bottas and Hamilton both thought there was something fundamentally wrong with the car. And yet they were able to get Hamilton in a situation, not only in terms of the fitness of the car, but in the right tactical position on the racetrack to get the tow and all that sort of thing, to let him put in a lap that perhaps only Lewis Hamilton can do among this current crop of drivers. So I think that was huge. And the fact that you have 4 different constructors in the first 2 rows covered by 0.3 of a second.
Yeah,
that's insane.
I mean, what does that say about contemporary Formula One and how far we've come from those dark years of Mercedes domination by a half second or a full second on the starting grid? It's fabulous. Couldn't be happier for Pierre Gasly, who I think is a very underrated driver. I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him. And so on down the field. I mean, bad luck for Lando Norris, or we'd have had 8 cars, well under a second at the front of the grid. So I think it's going to be spectacular. I still think Fernando Alonso has something to show us that he has not yet. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo's head's going to be totally scrambled after that crash that took him out of Q2. There are so many questions. And then you have, as you discussed in the first half hour, this strange and wonderful racetrack with 20 corners, so many of them, so difficult, high speed running, 200 miles an hour, down to heavy braking for a very tight corner, 4 crashes in qualifying, 6 total on the day, I think, yesterday, including practice in the morning. I think this is going to be a spectacular race.
I'm sorry, Bob. I have to just stop for a minute. After listening to you for so many years, when you just said this strange and wonderful racetrack, it is such a Varsha-ism. I love it.
Varsha-ism.
I absolutely love
that one.
Well, as Dave has pointed out, I mean, running up through the old town, it's a thing about Azerbaijan, and I'll try to make this quick. Years ago when I was covering IMSA, there was a driver on the entry list named Mark Thomas, and I noticed when I studied the entry list that his hometown was Baku, Azerbaijan, and this was when the Azerbaijan Grand Prix was just being proposed. So I looked him up at a race in Canada and said, what's your story? He was actually a BP petroleum engineer from Houston, Texas, an American who had been based in Baku because of the extraordinary role petroleum plays in that the country's economy. And, I said, most people, including myself, probably couldn't find Azerbaijan on a map. Yeah. So what can we expect from this race? He said it's going to be spectacular. He said there's such a huge oil industry in the country. Most of the money goes to the ruling family, it must be said, but they spread that money around. They have developed the city. It's beautiful on a coastline. The track will be spectacular, wide boulevards and tight little old town corners. He predicted the race would be great, and it certainly is. It's a real gem, I think.
Yeah. Hey, I want to ask you, Dave O'Neill, former team manager for a Formula One team, or for the Haas F1 team. What do you say to Daniel Ricciardo right now? Did you see him after this qualifying? He was just distraught, and it just did not sound like the Daniel Ricciardo that we know. What do? Do you walk up, you put your arm around him at this point? Because he's
Come on, honey badger.
Well, you, you know he's he's a fantastic driver. I've completely derailed my train of thought, Jonathan. You know he's a great driver, and but what do you say to him? What do you do?
Well, there's no certainly in F1. There's no time as too soon, as we say. After the moment. So you have to make light of it pretty quickly. He's struggling. He's a very good driver. I rate him highly, but we have to say and give praise to Lando. He's got it together.
Yeah.
He's made very, very few mistakes. And to jump back into the team and think you're going to be on equal footing with Lando is definitely playing part in his head. He's come from a huge amount of success, and I think he struggles to deal with it. But he's a strong guy, and motor racing is all about recovery, and he's going to turn around. He's going to make it work. But he beats himself up, just like anyone who wants to do really well. He gives himself a hard time when he makes a mistake, and he pushed where he shouldn't have, and that was the result. It comes and gets you, this place. You can't really make too many mistakes here.
I'm glad he's in this McLaren environment rather than the McLaren environment of old, and I think you all know what I mean by that. I've got a question for all of you. How harsh was that penalty on Norris? I just think that was too much.
I agree.
Who were the stewards?
Exactly. I'll find out for you, Dave. We'll take some numbers.
And then I can comment.
Yeah, I thought it was harsh. We all saw it in replay. We all heard the radios.
Yeah.
He was in the worst possible position
Yep.
at top speed on the straightaway, approaching the pit entrance when the red flag came out. And afterwards, he said, "What was I supposed to do? I mean, for all I knew, there was a blockage in the pit lane. I can't get down there, at full tilt boogie. I'll just stay on track." He did a very slow lap. He crept back around to the pits, and the steward said it could have been a 5-place penalty. Well, I don't think it should have been any kind of a penalty. I agree with Norris. It may, if you want to reprimand him, okay, fine.
And he asked his team, or his engineer, what should I do? And his engineer said, carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
when it
following
down,
orders.
Stop on the racetrack and ask, just come to a stop and say, I'm in a bad position. What do I do? But I thought that was a little much, especially, with all the life he and the McLaren team are showing. I mean, he deserves to be in that mix of 4 or 5 cars at the front, and hopefully he will be.
I want to pick up on Bob's comment about Gasly. Qualified in the top 6 4 times so far this season, and his time was 0.115 off Verstappen, the championship leader. Think about that. AlphaTauri is challenging Red Bull for qualifying.
Powered cars.
I know.
Yeah, and let's go down. Speaking of Red Bull, let's talk about Max Verstappen, because he was not happy after qualifying yesterday. In fact, he was so not happy that he dropped an S-bomb on the world feed across networks all over the planet. And well, Jonathan, what do you think about why was he upset?
Because he didn't get to do his final lap. I mean, I think his beef, if you will, were that people were causing too many red flags. But when you look at who was doing the red flags, it's not like it wasn't Mazepin, it was Stroll, and it was Ricciardo, and these are and in practice it was himself and Leclerc. So even the mighty do fall, and I think something Dave mentioned, which is that funnel-like wind at 15 was a factor yesterday, and it was pushing people into missing their braking points.
Yeah.
The other thing we should maybe pick up a little bit, there's a little scent there, is that he where he is in the championship, he's got his eyes set on it. So has the team, and that's a master blow for him to not be on the front row.
Yeah.
But Dave, what do you think about if in Baku, is it the worst ever? If it's Monaco and you're not starting on pole, your chances of winning are not good. But what about Baku, though? I mean, you think he's got not a bad place, really, right?
Well, he's got Hamilton there, isn't he? And Hamilton and him typically don't give up. So, I think he just, he wanted the number 1 spot. They had a plan for it. They were quick enough to do it. They just, like you guys have talked about, they just didn't get to do it. And that was it. That's his frustration. So,
Yeah, I
Hey,
mean,
guys,
go ahead, Bob.
well, before we go on, and I started thinking about this when we are talking about the Red Bull's success and Honda and all of that, we really would be remiss in not pointing out that Mansour Ogier has
Yes.
passed. And that's a headline we're going to be hearing about a lot. For folks who don't know, Mansour Ogier is a towering figure in the history of both the McLaren and the Williams teams. He was a French-born, part Saudi. He and his family amassed a huge fortune in commerce and business in Saudi Arabia, and he was a huge race fan. Funded the famous Techniques d'Avant-Garde, or TAG, Porsche V6 engine that powered McLaren to so many championships. I mean, a great guy, and it's a very sad moment for Formula One that he's passed. I don't mean to bring down the show, but I wanted to get that in.
Well,
No, and
we-
they've just done that actually on the ESPN TV. I'm just watching out the corner of my eye, and they just gave a memorial to him and showed pictures of him hanging out with various drivers and on the grid and so forth. And no, I think that's absolutely apt. And likewise, Max Mosley has also passed, a big F1 player.
Yeah. Well, we do need to take another break, but let me give out the phone number before we do, in case anybody wants to call and join the show. Everybody's waking up. We're seeing some people hit us up on Twitter, but the phone number is 512-643-5483. And feel free to call and talk to us, to ask us any questions. And I want to thank the guys at F1 in America just tweeting at us and saying it's a great day for a U.S.-based Azerbaijan Grand Prix pre-race show with Bob Varsha and Dave O'Neill. So thank you, guys. All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
So I think the name of this song is That Smell. Is the producer that good that he's thinking about
Yes, he is.
the smell of oil in Baku or Luling, Texas, depending on where
That's
you are?
the smell of money, baby.
Hey, I want, before we move on to more about Baku and the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and I want to talk about Miami. Miami will be hosting a Formula One race next year.
Wow.
For the second race in the United States for Formula One, if we don't have one this year, which we'll talk about later in the show. But we have a clip. We got to catch up with the mayor of Miami Gardens, which is the little suburb where the race is actually going to be held, where the stadium is. And we caught up with the mayor of Miami Gardens, Rodney Harris. And we have a little clip here. We have the entire interview we're going to put up on our YouTube and Facebook and wherever else. But we have a little clip, and I want to play that right now.
Yes, we will. We will have events throughout the city, and we'll continue to partner with the Miami Dolphins and Hard Rock Stadium and Formula One to ensure that we bring events to the city that's going to be world-class events that will be able to allow our residents the opportunity to participate and allow them the opportunity to see what Formula One is all about. So we will have events like a fan fest, and we will have other things. It's still kind of early in the game for us. But we're going to explore avenues in which we can get the word out to not only our residents, but we're going to represent an entire region here. This is going to be the only race in the entire state of Florida or on the southeast coast. So we'll have people that will probably come into our city from all around the world and from all around the United States, and we're looking forward to that. We really are. So we will have events as we continue to formalize what our plans are for Formula One, and probably the week, the month, or the months leading up to it, and we'll have those types of events. Yes, we will. We will have.
Yeah, this is going to be exciting to follow this, and we've got some more from Miami Gardens Mayor Rodney
Very
Harris.
interesting, actually.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff in there, and so we're gonna play some of that in the post show. And of course, we have Bobby Epstein, the chairman and CEO of Circuit of the Americas, live in the post race show to talk about the possibility of a doubleheader this year.
Yeah.
So,
And by the way, go online, if you're listening now, go online and take a look at the artistic impressions of that setup, i.e. the Miami Gardens round the Dolphin Stadium. because there's a good parallel with Azerbaijan. It is a street circuit, but my word, has it got some long, long straights. And I think it's going to be very similar to this race. It's going to be a fast street race.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me get in a word from our sponsor because we're really excited to have CrowdStrike on board. Has your workforce moved from the office or to the home or to the garage or maybe a rented cabin with open Wi-Fi? If your company has expanded outside the office and moved all your applications to the cloud, there's a whole new world of threats you have to worry about, including ransomware. CrowdStrike revolutionized security by harnessing the speed and the power of the cloud to identify and stop the most advanced cyber attacks, even those that have never been seen before. So now you can securely work anywhere. Try CrowdStrike Falcon free today and protect your data and employees anywhere. Welcome to Anywhere. CrowdStrike, we stop breaches. Access the CrowdStrike Falcon platform free at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. And how appropriate is this sponsor right now with what's been going on?
Yeah.
I mean, with the oil hacking and now the beef industry.
Well, and they're being interviewed. CrowdStrike, the SolarWinds thing, it was a CrowdStrike guy that solved it for them. So, yeah, they couldn't be more relevant around the world at this point, not just to Formula One.
Yeah, and CrowdStrike.
I needed CrowdStrike this morning to get me back on the air.
There you go, yeah. Clearly, you and Bob were in trouble.
Got a phone number for those folks?
Yeah, we get you hooked up.
Just go to the website, Bob, and click on.
You'll be pleased to know he's a racing driver, the boss.
Yeah, he is. He is.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, we got about 5 minutes left in the show, so we're only 6 or 7 minutes from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, the start of this, which I'm so excited to see what happens with not only Charles Leclerc but Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton right behind him. But a couple more things. Let's talk about the length of the track too. It's the third longest of 2020 of the season after. It's 3.73 miles. So we think of COTA here as being a long one.
3.4, yeah.
Yeah, but it's got 20 direction changes. It's 51 laps. It runs counterclockwise. So, and this is the fifth race here run since, 2019. And Dave, you were there for the first one, right?
Yes. Yeah, first race.
Yeah. And so, there is lots to discuss about this, but one thing we haven't touched on, and I wanted to touch on this, and Bob Varsha, I know you have been following a lot of this, in the issue of the bendy, as they call them, the flexible wings and the changing aerodynamics that happens when that happens. I mean, what do you think is going to happen with this, Bob?
Well, new rules are coming in, new tests are coming into play in the scrutineering garage with the next race in France, which drove Toto Wolff of Mercedes totally crazy because he thought, well, you're letting the criminals run around until you throw them in jail. And tongues have gotten sharp. I mean, Toto Wolff has called Christian Horner of Red Bull a windbag who ought to, just wants to be on TV. And Horner's responded saying Toto Wolff has bendy wings on his car, so he ought to keep his mouth shut, and on and on and on and on. The problem cropped up in Spain, I believe, in Barcelona. In Monaco, it didn't matter because nobody going fast enough to detect any issue or any benefit from the bendy wings. Here, it can be huge. I mean, it's roughly, I don't know if it's the equivalent in lap time of the DRS, the totally legal drag reduction system, but it's the same principle. You lay down the wings on the straightaway for top speed, and then they pop back into place for downforce in the corners. Protests have been threatened. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think anything's going to happen because there's a well-ingrained spirit in Formula One that you don't rock the boat. You can threaten to rock it like crazy, but unless it's a really, really serious matter, you don't mess with it.
Because you're all in the boat.
Because you're all in the boat, precisely. So, I don't think since the new tests are coming online at the next race, I don't think we're going to hear any more about it.
And Dave O'Neill, I got to ask you, being a former team manager, about this kind of thing, flexible wings and aerodynamics. And I mean, first of all, do you think that it really could make that much difference to even compare it to DRS? And second, how do you treat things like this? Do you devote resources and things? How do you in your hat with the team manager hat on?
Yeah, a few questions there. I think, first of all, you kind of have to pick your battles because normally you're up to no good as well, or good, whichever way you look at it.
Well
So I think, Mercedes have definitely got something. They're probably making a load of noise just to see if Red Bull can back it back a little bit, which will bring it back into play for them. But Mercedes will be up to something else. They will have studied what Red Bull are doing.
Right.
And the others, and they will have been trying something different themselves for sure. When it comes to difference, huge amount of difference. And as you come to a circuit like this, where you have, the straight, which is longer than you think because of the corners that lead up to the straight, you're starting to go flat out, 2 or 3 corners beforehand, and building up the speed. So, massive difference here. And again, it's all about gaining advantages. But they will be talked about openly in the meetings, in the team managers' meetings or the technical meetings. It's just how the approach goes. And again, like Bob says, we're all in the same boat. So it's like, how much damage are we going to do if we open it up? So, some of the things are cleaned up before they get opened up.
Well, I love the fact that you said that you can't say anything because you got something else that you're probably shouldn't be doing, as every team manager does. But that's Formula One. That's racing, man. You've got to be trying to find the loophole anywhere you can. But well, guys, we are down to that point. We just have about a minute or so left. I want to get predictions about who we think's going to win this race and who we want to win this race. I'd like to add that one in there. I'll start with you, Jonathan.
I want Pierre Gasly to win this race because he's been knocking on the door. All shenanigans could happen given the fact that we've got Hamilton kind of desperate, but at least desperate to get back on front foot, as it were, and almost surprised that he is where he is. So I've got a feeling that he's going to try harder perhaps than he normally would, knowing that he hasn't got a car that is capable of beating Verstappen today. So therefore, my gut feeling says Verstappen to win.
Yeah, there you go. All right, what about you, Bob Varsha?
Well, I would remind everybody that 4 previous runnings of this race produced 12 podium positions. And in a completely bizarre factoid with regard to Formula One, 5 of those 12 podium positions have come from drivers starting further back than 5th on the grid, which is unheard of in F1 these days. So, anything is going to happen here. I agree completely with Jonathan. I'd love to see Pierre Gasly get another victory following that one at Monza last year. All right,
well, let's go to Dave. We're almost out.
Verstappen.
All right, Dave, you got 10 seconds. Who do you want?
I'm going to go to the first 4, finish like that.
Okay, I like it.
There you go. All right, I'm going to say I would love to see Yuki Tsunoda on the podium. That's all. I'll take that.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget, on the post-race show, we have Coda boss Bobby Epstein. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you after the race.